No, AI is not going to take your job. However, if you're an average to a below average worker, well, AI and these AI tools may actually take your job. Now, that information comes from this study right here that says that these new technologies can do an average job pretty well. However, they can't really do an excellent job. Or another way of saying is that this means that new or low performing employees who are doing an average or below average jobs are more at risk than those who are doing an excellent job, or really the ones who have a lot of experience already and who pretty much know what the expected outcome will be. Now, this study also mentioned that they had a productivity boost of 14%, or at least in this study from Stanford University, when these generative AIs were in a customer service environment. Now, if you've been following AI news for some time now, this 14% boost of productivity, that uncommon, because yes, I do believe that these AI tools, especially these large language models, do provide a productivity boost, especially when I'm using them as a software developer in my day-to-day tasks. I do receive a productivity boost when I use them. Things like, doing rewrites of codes, doing refactoring of pre-existing code where, doesn't necessarily have, any of the new standards of writing code, or maybe you can tell that it was written by maybe 3 or 4 different developers and it just doesn't have like a coherent thought pattern flowing through it. Passing that code off to like these large language models like ChatGPT, at least for me, and rewriting them, is definitely a productivity boost because, it allows me to sit there, not necessarily, understand every line of the code that was pre-existing. I could just pass it through it and have it rewrite it, maybe like in a functional programming principles. Maybe I can, say, hey, rewrite this code from a, the new JavaScript standard or whatever, anything like that. It's very, very, very useful in those particular instances, at least for me. There are other instances where I tried to use it, but it didn't necessarily give me that wow factor. I think a lot of people who try to use these things try to use it in the sense of like the brainstorming aspect of it, but at least for me, it just didn't really pay off that well. But in other things like summarizations, which also that this study says that that these tools are really, really good for. When I use it in that sense, it really works for me also. And that's kind of what I think that these AI tools moving forward will more primarily be used for. Things to pretty much compress things. Things where if you have like a large text of information and you just kind of just want to say, hey, what is the meaning of this text? What is the main idea that's being trying to conveyed in this text? Because I know when I'm talking to different colleagues or just people around me, a lot of people like to just write word after word after word, paragraph after paragraph of just information. And a lot of times I'm like, you know what? Okay, yeah, I can read that. However, passing it on to something like or ChatGPT and have it summarized for me is one of those productivity boosts that, what? I would pay money for. I simply just pay money for. I know a lot of other companies will also do that too. So, I think that's what really these AI tools are really meant to do. And another thing that this study also mentioned is that these generative AIs today are really about augmenting the human, not necessarily replacing the human. Because if you actually use these things after a while, you will kind of see that, yes, these things can generate, new ideas for you, like in a brainstorming session. What you'll quickly find out is that a lot of these things kind of go into what they call like a hallucination, where these things will just kind of just make up stuff. It doesn't have any coherentness to it at all. It's just, especially when you're trying to do like facts-based, gathering, these things are just not that great for that. Another thing that this study also mentioned was that, when it comes to more complex, tier 2 requests, which are specialized, unique, and unexpected, that's when the human pretty much is going to have to take over, because these AI tools are not really that good, at least not right now, at handling. For me, when I hear these stories of, oh, AI is going to take your job, it's all over, not really. I don't think so. If you are going into a new field and you kind of really like what you're doing, then AI is not threatening your job at all. Now, if you're an artist, these image to text generators also will not threaten your job because, again, if you use those tools in any sense, you will realize that those things are not, at least for now, and possibly maybe in the near future, they're not really there yet where to find details. You're still going to need artists to go in there and clean up different things, different aspects of those images. Maybe in 5, maybe in 10 years, these things would get so powerful where you don't necessarily need an artist to clean it up, but we're not there yet. So, for me, if I was just starting off in my career nowadays, I probably will take the stance that AI tools are not there to threaten your job. They're there to really, like this paper said, to augment what you're doing. Augment like I would say like the mundane tasks out. And so you should want to get to a point where you're becoming an expert at what you do so that, you can rely more on your intuition aspect of the job, not necessarily the things that, like, let's say you're a programmer, right? I wouldn't be trying to compete with like a linter, which is just a tool that goes in, maybe marks your code, maybe clean it up, maybe transforms it into like something different, to correct a few errors here and there. Now, back in the day, I wouldn't feel threatened by that, which is really, I would probably say, like a predecessor to all of these generative AIs that we have nowadays. Like, so when I was reading this article, what really stood out for me was the whole sense of that AI is really there to augment. It's really there to augment what you're doing and not necessarily replace what you're doing, because as at least of right now, they're good at doing average tasks, but not really good at that exceptional, that unexpected, that unique situation where, for the most part, humans are still good at.